everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Gargee and I'm here with Anandi, and we are the hosts of Stars and Feathers Readalong, where we are reading all the published works of Ancrum and Anna-Marie McLemore. And today we are getting the biggest chance to interview one of those authors, and Anna-Marie is here with us today, who is the award-winning author of The Weight of Stars, When the Moon Was Ours, Blanca and
Wild,
Roja, Drake Deepest Red, and sorry, I missed
Wild
one.
Beauty.
Their upcoming book, The Mirror Season, is going to release on 16th of March 2021. So, hi, AM, how are you today?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, just a quick little question before we start. So, Wild Beauty was recently named Time's 100 Best Fantasy of All Time. So, when you got that news, what was your reaction?
Oh, I was shocked in the best way. There are so many books on that list that are some of my favorites. So it was just like I was speechless. I still kind of am, clearly, but I'm so grateful. I'm so honored to be on that list with some of my favorite authors and some of my favorite books.
We were so happy to see you on that list along with so many of our favorites, and like it really made our day. And there was just so much happiness around on like all the internet, like every where the book community exists. There was just so much happiness for you and all the authors of color that were on that list.
Yes.
So congratulations! It's it must be amazing.
Yeah, it was really wonderful news to share with family too, because Blanca y Roja is a book that has like some of my queerest themes in books, and being able to like share that with my family and like be like, okay, like these, we're telling our stories, we're telling stories from our community, and I'm telling stories from my community. It was something special to share with them, especially since conversations about queerness and about trans and non-binary identity aren't always easy to have in all of our communities. So getting to talk about it through stories, whether they're books I've written or books that I've loved and want to share with other people, that's something that means a lot to me.
We wanted to ask you, all of the books and like stories that you have written for anthologies, they have all been magical realism. So, what does this genre mean to you personally, and why do you keep coming back to it every single time that you choose to tell a story?
So I think things that are at the heart of magical realism for me are the ideas of community and the ideas of a mutual understanding of oppression and of how we survive it together. So with the community aspect of it, the way I think of magic a lot in magical realism is that usually it doesn't belong to any one person. Usually it belongs to a family, a community. And usually you're not going to know what it's going to do next. You can't really predict it. You can't control it. And often it's going to make you confront things that either you or your community have not wanted to confront, things that have gone unspoken, but that need to be faced, that need to be addressed. So that's part of it, the idea of community. And the idea of an understanding of oppression is this concept of finding the beautiful in the midst of the heartbreaking, finding the extraordinary in the midst of the tragic. And I think that's why magical realism is so special to marginalized communities and marginalized writers, because we have that sort of shared understanding. It becomes a common language, and I think that's part of why I keep coming back to magical realism. I think I will keep coming back. I'm working on a couple of other things that are a little bit away from magical realism. I'm working on stuff that's a little bit more fantasy based, and one of my short stories that just came out in A Universe of Wishes is, I'd say that's solidly fantasy. But magical realism is sort of my home as a storyteller. So even when I'm writing outside it, I think those ideas of community and those ideas of supporting each other is something that's still with me.
So I like how you mentioned community and the impact of magical realism on it, because historically it was kind of a tool used by people to resist colonization. And we have seen a little bit of that in all of your stories, and we love to see it because, we are also from colonized countries, previously colonized countries. So there's a
Sorry,
certain
sorry.
thread that we can connect to. So I wanted to ask you about this. So you mentioned how there is a community is an important thing in this. So most of the stories that you have read, the books that I have read, there is this sort of disconnection from community for most of the main characters that we have, because mostly they are like ostracized or othered constantly. So how do you bring that aspect of community into your writing, at the same time writing characters who are ostracized this way?
So I think I often end up writing about found family. I mean, I write a lot about family that you grow up with too. That's something that's there a lot. But I think I write about found family because it's something that's so important to queer identity, to trans and non-binary identity. This idea of making your family, and some of that family is going to be people that you grew up with. Some of that family is going to be people that become your family along the way. So even when you have these characters, even when I write characters where the world is telling them something about you is wrong, we don't like something about you, even when the world is telling them that, they have a community that's affirming their identity, that's telling them, when you're ready to declare who you are, we will be here. And there's no time limit on that. Like, we will love you as you are. And especially because identity is a work in progress. It changes. And whether you're talking about specific words that we use to describe our identities, or just senses of our identity in general, that's something that changes. So having that community, having a smaller community within the world that's going to tell you, whoever you are, that's beautiful. That's a matter of, it's not only affirmation, it's a matter of survival in our communities.
I think this a great example of this was like in Dark and Deepest Red, which where in the end, even though Lala doesn't ask the people from the like uh,
The
town to follow her,
Strathmore.
they still they still come with her, and it's such a powerful moment in the story. Like I think that was the moment when I was holding my tears until then, but when that happened, I just started crying because it was just so. Like you said, it was so affirming and it was so powerful for someone to like watch this acceptance, this mutual understanding among all these people, and it was a fabulous scene. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me. I loved writing that ending because it's sort of reflective of the fact that, like, often we have community around us, like whether we see it or not, and we eventually do find each other. It takes a little while sometimes,
Yeah.
but we do find each other. And I loved writing Lala realizing throughout the story, little by little, that like there are people like her all around her.
Yeah.
And I think that happens to us in life too. I think it takes a while, but when it happens, it's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Going back to like magical realism and everything, in the genre, one of the most salient features of the genre in a way is the lyrical prose and the purple prose that comes with it. Like you have this incredibly atmospheric setting that you achieve because of how, like, gripping the prose is and everything. Personally, I think your prose is the most beautiful thing that I've ever read, and I tell people that all the time. And everyone who's read your books with us kind of agrees with me because they've been enamored by everything, the prose that you've written. So all the questions that we got from the audience were like, how do you approach your writing, and how do you like construct your prose, and do you have any tips for anyone who wants to write lyrical prose and everything?
Oh, thank you so much. So thinking about writing in a way that brings in a lot of our imagination, that brings in a lot of the connections our brain makes. I think that's how I think about it. part of how I do it is being okay with getting with like going in the wrong direction in the service of eventually going in the right direction. Because I think often like our writer brains are a little faster than the rest of our brain can keep up with sometimes. Our storyteller brains can sort of leap ahead of us. Yeah. And that's something that can be a little bit disorienting, and it still is to me sometimes, but it's also something that's beautiful, because if you go with the different connections in your brain, they're not always going to be right, but they're going to take you in unexpected directions. And that sometimes that's on a sentence level, sometimes it's on a story level. So I've learned to sort of go with the weird quirks of my brain. I'm neurodivergent. I also like, I have synesthesia, so like numbers, like certain numbers or certain colors to me, and that's my weird brain. But I think we all have like some kind of weird magic to our brains. Like I think every single one of us makes those kinds of connections in a different way, and I think that's part of how you find your writer voice.
That actually makes so much sense when you said it like that, because I really didn't think about it that way. But yeah, oh my God, that's so right. Because I actually started writing again when I read When the Moon Was Ours, because I was so inspired by the prose in the book. And even to this day, I'm like, it kind of helped me find my voice, like you said, because when I connected to the prose, I was like, this is what I want to feel when I write. And that kind of, guided me forward, one could say.
Thank you so much. That's the biggest compliment, because like if my books like make people want to tell their stories too, that's a wonderful thing.
Like Anandi mentioned, that she said that the way that you write it, that is how she wants to feel when people read her work. And I think there is something very beautiful about your writing in that way as well, because this was my first time reading your books, all because of Anandi. She talked about you so much. I was like, fine, I will read all of those books.
I
And
bully my friends.
yeah. So what happened was, like, when I started reading them, so the first time I meet a character, it's like there has to be an impact when you meet your main character. And every time I met every single one of your characters, there was like something intrinsic I understood about them just because of the way they thought. And I thought that was really amazing. I was just blown away by it.
So, okay, I'm gonna ask a little lighthearted question before we get into the characters and stuff. So all of your books have this beautiful flavor of like culture and tradition and these little things that all these characters do. It could be something as small as like putting salt outside their windows or hanging herbs in their kitchen or something like that. So growing up, what was one of your favorite traditions that you followed in your family, and what was your favorite tradition to write about in all the years that you've been doing this?
My favorite, well, they're probably the same answer, and it's a big category, but it's the first one that comes to mind. My favorite traditions are probably related to food and related to cooking, related to like what kind of spices my mother put in things, and the way that like we had our own way of doing something, and every family would like we have our own way of making arroz, we have our own way of making rice, and of course like we think our way is the right way, and every single family thinks that their way is the right way. That's part of what I love about it. So traditions related to food are something that I remember growing up, partly because like I had a little, like I'm not very good at reading recipes, partially because I'm dyslexic. So there were some hilarious results sometimes, and my mother was like, okay, we're just gonna have to teach you orally. Like my mother's also dyslexic, so she understood and probably had more patience with this than a lot of mothers had. So learning that growing up, and then getting to write about traditions related to food, like in Mirror Season, I write a lot about pan dulce, and to really do this, I'm kind of a method writer, like sort of a method actor. Like I have to go do the things that I'm going to write about at least as much as possible. Like there was a lot of dancing for Dark and Deepest Red. Like I was in the dance studio like more than I should have been, because I was like, okay, like I'm going to simulate this as much as I possibly can. So for Mirror Season, I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to like face my fear of yeast, because I'm really terrible with yeast. Like I'm a pretty good baker, but yeast has been the thing that's gotten me for years. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to learn to do this. And for a while, it was like, it was really hard. And every time I like failed at the pan dulce, I was like apologizing to my ancestors, being like, I'm sorry, I got it wrong again. But it got a little better and a little better. And I also learned that like a beautiful sugar shell on top of like a concha, on top of the pan dulce, can cover like a multitude of baking sins. So it was this process of being like, okay, like I've got the sugar shell, eventually like I'll get the pan that's underneath. So it was the same kind of thing as learning growing up. Like it was trial and error and getting a little better as you go.
I don't have any word. That's so cute.
No, I just remember my mom trying to teach me how to like make rasam and stuff at home. Like that's not a dish that we eat here. And I was just so I don't like going into the kitchen. So my mom used to be like, you need to learn this. And before I went abroad for the first time, she was like, no, you have to cook for yourself. You can't starve somewhere I can't feed you. So that's I kind of understand like the homeliness that comes when you think about like food traditions.
Yeah, I think
That's such a mom thing, isn't it? Like I'm
Yeah.
like, if you don't know these specific recipes, like you will not eat when you leave, and I will be
Yeah.
responsible. Like for
Yeah,
your survival, you must learn these particular recipes, and often they're
exactly.
kind of hard. Like, and I'm like, really? Do I have to learn these? Like I know how to make arroz. I know how to make like really easy things. Like, do I have to learn this one to be able to like be an adult? It's so yeah. I love the sort of like languages of food that happen in families.
I think it was the same with when my mom taught me to cook, and like all of it was done orally. She doesn't follow any recipes, and I don't either.
No,
Yeah,
yeah, like it's you put this chili powder in it until it feels right. Like
yeah.
if you don't have
Like
these many words,
even
it's
the
like you feel
measurements,
it.
they are so intuitive. Like you just look
Yeah,
at it and you know it's right.
you know, it's like that's how my mom tells me. Like you feel it, it's fine.
Yeah, you feel it. And it's like sometimes, so when I started working, I had a bunch of friends who had come in to my workplace for training from USA, Canada, and other countries. And they were like, "Oh, I really like this dish. How do you make it?" And I'm just like, "I cannot tell you the recipe. It's all very intuitive."
I know that thing where they're like, "Oh, is it a secret recipe?" And I was like, it's like it's a secret even from me sometimes. I
Exactly.
couldn't write it down.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to we want to talk about your characters. All of them are enamoring. They are so full of life and just so full of, they're so vibrant. They are wonderfully and unapologetically queer, and we love them so much. So we want to know, how do you approach writing them, and which one was your favorite to write till date?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to think about who's my favorite to write for like writing characters. I sort of have to wait to meet them. Like I have to be pretty patient. Usually the setting will come before the character does, because the setting starts to come to life and the characters take a little while to like talk to me and introduce themselves. And I think sometimes that's because like characters kind of emerge as a cast to me sometimes. So you learn a little bit about one and you learn a little bit about the other, and they start talking to each other, and they also grow like with the setting. So I think it's one of those like it's one of those magic things about writing where you don't exactly know like who's going to emerge first, because every single process for every book is a little different, and sometimes like the character that you need to start talking first just doesn't, and another character who you thought was going to take a little bit longer is like, okay, I'm gonna tell you who I am. And I think sometimes that's because setting comes first to me. So sometimes that character who starts being a little bit more active first I have a clearer sense of how they interact with the setting, like what their relationship has been with this place where they live, or this place they have just moved to, this community that they're in. So it's a little bit of a different process every time, and I've sort of learned to be okay with the fact that it's all like some like pieces of an image coming into focus, and there's a certain amount of patience that that has to come with that. Even if I'm looking at it thinking like I can figure this out, sometimes I just have to go do something else. I have to read another book. I have to go live in the world and just wait for it to come, because I think sometimes that's how it goes with crafting your world. Like you'll have bursts of like, yes, I know what's going to happen, and then you let those sort of settle, and then the next thing comes. So in terms of, wait, you're asking like my favorite character to write?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, who was my favorite character to write? I'm thinking of this because Dark and Deepest Red came out recently. I really loved writing Alifair, like my medieval trans boy apprentice. I think I loved writing him just because like he's this like sweet, soft, but also kind of like tough trans boy. And because like this is so embarrassing to admit, but like when I was first like thinking maybe I might be queer, like I always knew that like we as brown people have existed in the entire world for as long as there have been people, we have been here. I knew that. Like that, I was like, we have always been here. That was always something that I just knew. But the embarrassing part is that I thought that like lesbians were invented in the 1960s, and I thought like all queer people like first existed in like the 20th century. So like this idea that I was talking to sort of teen me and being like, no, there was someone like you. There was a trans boy like you. For anyone who doesn't know this, who's confused, who's going to be watching this, I'm bigender. Like half the time I'm like this, and half the time I'm a boy. So getting to like think like there were queer communities, like even if they didn't have the language for it, like there were trans and non-binary communities, even if they didn't use the same words for themselves that we do now. So writing a trans boy in 1518, and writing a trans boy that I would later find out that I had a lot more in common with than I thought, because I did not realize that I was trans and non-binary when I wrote that book. I think that was something that was really special to me.
And he was such a heartthrob. Like, I have not met a person who's read Dark and Deepest Red and is not in love with Alifair. Like, everyone loves him. Everyone in the book.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit B.
That makes me so happy. Thank you. I love writing trans and non-binary heartthrobs.
I was just talking about how Cole is also like, I know he's very young, but man, teenage me would have been like in love with him if I was in the same school as him. I would just be like,
Even Paige.
Miss Meteor. Yeah, Paige. Oh my God.
Paige.
Yeah.
So I listened to the audiobook for Blanca and Roja, and I don't remember exactly who did the voice acting for Paige, but I remember texting Anandi every single time Paige's POV came in. I was just like, oh my God, her voice is so sexy.
Oh, her name is Therese Plummer. And when I first, when they told me that they were going to do 4 different voices for Blanca y Roja, I thought, this is amazing. Like, cause I didn't think that they would do that. Cause that's a lot to put in. And I was so excited. And I thought, how are you going to cast Paige? Like, how is that going to work? And then they sent me Therese's sample, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. Like, that's Paige.
That was the most perfect voice that like I could have imagined for Paige.
I know, like you said the voice was good. I was like, that's because Paige is like the most attractive human being. So it makes sense.
Oh, thank you so much. All these characters have the confidence that I did not have in high school, because like I was like tiny little like angry trans boy who like wanted to be tall and athletic but definitely wasn't. So all these like confident heartthrob characters I get to like write who trans boy me wanted to be.
That's so heartwarming.
So since we're talking about trans and non-binary characters, so we wanted to ask you if it's not too much trouble. So since you are a trans and non-binary person of color in the industry and in publishing, where even though we are seeing a wave of a lot of queer stories coming in, how was it when you started out and how much has it changed till now?
I think something I'm really grateful for is the fact that big conversations were starting around the time I debuted and the year before I debuted. I believe We Need Diverse Books, whose work I am so grateful for. I think they were established in 2014, I want to say, which is the year before my first book came out. So coming out into that, no pun intended, I guess, in that environment was very different than I think it would have been 5 years before. And we still, like, there was a long way to go, and we still have a long way to go. But getting to be in an environment where we were at least having those conversations, where even if we had a long way to go and still do, we at least were starting to like have bigger conversations about that. It wasn't just like those of us who grew up not seeing ourselves on shelves like talking to each other, and like that's a wonderful thing, like us being able to talk to each other and share the experience of saying like I thought books weren't for me because I didn't see myself or my family or my community on shelves. Those are conversations that we need, and that we have needed, and that I really needed. And we had been having those conversations in our own communities, and we'd been finding each other, like readers of color, like queer and trans and non-binary readers. We'd been finding each other and having those conversations. But then those conversations started getting bigger, and it wasn't just we're telling our stories in ways that we didn't think were going to. It is progress for people to see that there is a problem. And I know that's a really blunt way to put it, because like that is sort of, that should be the bare minimum. But that was huge progress. That was, to me, earth-shattering progress. The fact that those conversations were happening, and it was even people who weren't from marginalized communities acknowledging that there was a problem. That was something that I'm so grateful for. And because I kind of felt like I was going to have to apologize for being Latinx, for being queer, and for writing books that featured my communities. I thought I was coming from a point of view of thinking I had to focus on other things in the book and sort of like play those things down, because we're so used to the default being white, straight, cis. We are so used to that there's this instinct to apologize for anything else. And I think that I'm still learning to be proud of those things. I'm still learning to be proud of all my identities. But I think I'm a lot farther than I would have been without debuting in 2015, when We Need Diverse Books was already doing all the work that they were doing. And even before then, there were a lot of authors doing a lot of work. But this is a movement, and it takes time. And I do feel optimistic for the future, even though I do think we have a long way to go. Like, yeah. And I know that, I know you both know that. Like we're talking in a group that understands. Like the three of us understand that. And I hope that everyone else like knows that like this is something that we're going to have to continue to do for years and years. Is look at inclusivity and look at intersectionality, like. Because most of us have multiple identities. And I think that is one thing that's changed that I really appreciate, is the fact that like, this still happens sometimes, but I think when I debuted, there was more of like, really you're going to talk about queerness and brown identity in the same book. And it was like, well, that's what I am. Like that's, I would get questions about like, why did you decide to write a diverse book? I would get those questions, and I'd say, I I didn't decide to write a diverse book any more than I decided to live a diverse life. Like this is who we are, and a lot of us
Yeah.
a lot of us have those intersectional identities. So I think there's a lot more embracing of that than there was. So I'm grateful for when I got to debut, and I'm also grateful for the fact that we are making forward progress, even though we do have a lot more work to do.
Yeah, like what you said was absolutely right. Like it's not. Uh, I can only think about like Desi or Indian identity in books. For instance, we still don't see Indian brown women and queerness together because that's still a big taboo. But at least people are starting to acknowledge that this is a problem, and we're gonna have to, face it head on and like do something about it. And if nobody's telling those stories, then you got to start telling them yourself because someone has to start somewhere, right? So it's just it, even though it's a long answer, you actually hit the nail on the head, because that is the problem and that is the solution, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of us, like we all have to tell these stories together, because together
Yeah.
we have to represent our communities, since
Yeah.
like and that's something that I'm grateful for too, is that like there seems to be more awareness that like no one book can represent one experience.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
And
like there's no single story anymore, and that's a
exactly.
good thing.
Yeah.
Hey, that was really a spectacular answer. And books like yours are helping other people embrace the multiple identities that people hold. And yeah, I hope that everyone keeps doing this work, and I hope we keep seeing these kind of books because they're helping people like me and other people out there. Yeah, this is amazing.
No,
Yeah.
the thing that I remember is like from Wild Beauty. I cannot quote it well. I'm so sorry, but there's this paragraph you write where you talk about how the girls' mothers sometimes don't understand that just because they love both genders doesn't mean that they're I don't know how
That
to
their
phrase it.
love is not easy to give just because they can love in more ways
Yeah,
than one.
exactly. Yeah, and like how their bisexuality is just or it's just a part of who they are, and it's something that that's not unnatural or something that they need. Like it doesn't change who they are as people. And that quote is like always in my head. I have it journaled. I always like when I read that, I was like, it's supposed to be that simple. Like why don't people get it? It's so I just wanted to mention that because when you were talking about this, I remembered it.
Well, thank you.
Let's wrap this up. So just before we end this interview, we would like if you could share something, a little something about the Mirror season that's coming out pretty soon.
Yes, Mirror season comes out in March, and this is my book about enchanted pan dulce and secret forests and characters who are sexual assault survivors, supporting each other and helping each other find their voices and find their path forward and finding magic. This is a book that was scary for me to write, and is scary to go out in the world, but that I'm really proud of, because this is a book that talks about how identity interacts with the experience of being a survivor. The two main characters of this story are Ciela Cristales. She's a queer brown girl who bakes enchanted pan dulce. Part of what I was talking about earlier was to research the baking that she does. And Locke, who is a boy who's a sexual assault survivor. So they both have very different experiences with what that shift in their life means and what their path forward is going to look like. But they both have this experience of what society has told them about themselves interacting with what their experience as a survivor is. So this was a book that that I wanted to involve magic, because I think a lot of being a survivor is finding your own magic again. It's finding your voice, but also finding what lights you up, finding what your magic is when your whole world changes. So this book is a lot about that. and also about a magic pasteleria, and what we make as a community, and what we build, and what we inherit. I'm trying to like say this without saying too much, because there's a gift that that Sienna has inherited, related to baking and related to pain dulce, that comes out in this book. So I didn't think I was going to be writing about queer identity related to sexual assault. I knew that I was going to be writing a Latina survivor, but I didn't know for a little bit when I was starting it that I was going to write about queer identity. But that was something that ended up being really important, because I wanted to write about the process of how you reclaim yourself, and you decide who you are despite what anyone else has done to you and what anyone else has decided about you. So it's a book about, in that in very much in the tradition of magical realism, in the midst of that heartbreak, finding that joy and finding that pride and finding that magic.
We are waiting with bated breath for it to release, and we are so excited to see another magical thing that is coming out of your brain. And just we're very, very excited for the mirror season.
Oh my god,
So
it's kind of, oh,
yeah.
this made me a little emotional. Just thinking about it. Yeah. Okay.
So just a heads up for the viewers, we will be hosting a giveaway for the pre-order of the mirror season. I will be adding a link in the description below, so please check that out. So I think this is it. Thank you
Oh my
so
God.
much
Thank
for
you so
joining
much
us,
for,
AM.
yeah.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed talking with you both, and I so appreciate this. Thank you.